Welcome to today's webinar, Behaviorally Smart Entrepreneurship, sponsored by the Emory Office of Alumni Career Services. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. And I should say as well, this webinar is part of a series hosted by our Emory Entrepreneur Network. We host several webinars throughout the year, and all webinars, whether they are geared towards entrepreneurs or other professionals, are housed on the Emory University YouTube channel under the Career Webinars playlist. We have over 80 past webinars housed there. And today's webinar with Hugh Massie, CEO of DNA Behavior International, will be recorded and housed on the YouTube channel for your convenience. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Sarah Rawls, Director of Alumni Career Services. And please send in your questions to Hugh. I'm going to turn it over to him in a moment, but we will leave time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So feel free to type your questions to me into the question area on the GoToWebinar control panel. Afterwards, I will send everyone a copy of Hugh's presentation deck and more information on DNA Behavior International, because there is an assessment that Hugh will be talking to you about today. And if you're having any issues with GoToWebinar, feel free to also send those to me in the question area, or you may want to shut down some of your applications on your computer or join us over the conference line if your computer audio is not as strong. So a bit more about our presenter. As a behavioral strategist and the CEO of DNA Behavior International, Hugh Massie travels the world helping entrepreneurs and leaders understand how they are wired for success and what motivates their decision making. With over 60,000 hours of experience, Hugh has mentored millions of people, including entrepreneurs, the leaders of more than 2,500 businesses, and 20,000 financial advisors in 123 countries. His purpose is mentoring people to be behaviorally smart for achieving greater self-empowerment so they can unlock their human potential and live with meaning. And since 2001, Hugh continues to lead the way globally with developing innovative behavioral analytics technology, which powers solutions to help entrepreneurs understand who they are and to know, engage, and grow with every employee and client. Hugh is also a sought-after corporate strategist, mentor, financier, and board member, and he has a unique ability to problem solve. We were excited to host Hugh at the Emory Entrepreneur Network Breakfast Series in Atlanta back in November. I can send you all the video of that presentation. So thank you, Hugh, for joining us again, this time virtually, and we're glad that alumni from around the country have joined us on today's webinar. Hugh, I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, it's great to be with all of you today. Hopefully everyone can understand my Australian accent. I do live in Atlanta, but I did move to Atlanta from Sydney, Australia as part of my entrepreneurial journey. Today, I'm going to take you through behaviorally smart entrepreneurship. And really what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of a behavioral workout and show you what it's like in the behavioral gym so that all of you, whether you are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or are already an entrepreneur, will get some takeaways on what is necessary to succeed as an entrepreneur. And I'm, as you would guess from the title with behavior in there, we're going to really be talking about the inner game. And all the great entrepreneurs out there that have been very successful have done a lot of work on themselves to succeed. For example, Steve Jobs had a coach, just like Tiger Woods and many of the great golfers, Rory McIlroy, whoever you follow out there in sports, all have great coaches, and they work on their mental game, and that's very important to entrepreneurial success. For me, I am a serial entrepreneur, but I wasn't always an entrepreneur. I suppose in a way I was born as an entrepreneur in terms of my mindset. I was always thinking about business as a child, and I even did my first transaction while I was still at university with a piece of real estate. But I then did work in the world as a CPA when I finished my accountancy and economic degrees. And so I went down the very rational world of dealing with numbers. And today I position myself as a reformed accountant. And after having 10 years of experience as a CPA, and working in 3 different countries, I decided that the burn to drive to be an entrepreneur was too great, and I left my job and went out on the street and thought I could rub 2 sticks together and make a fire and see what I could do with my life. When I did that, I was just turned 30 years old. And so in the last 20 years, so that sort of gives you a little bit of an idea of my age, or maybe it's the last 22 years, just to be mathematically correct, I've started and founded 5 different businesses. And four of them are listed here. They still operate, and the main one is DNA Behavior. It's a behavioral data and technology solutions business, and this is something business I founded in 2001. And then I have a company called Big Review TV that I am the chairman of and a founding shareholder of, which is a social media video marketing technology. This is actually the unicorn in my portfolio, so it's become pretty quickly a big business with more than 100 million turnover. This business I hope to turn into a unicorn as well, but it's a little bit behind. There's a lot of growth here, so with a very powerful executive team here, we've really pushed that one along. Then I have a funds management business and also a retirement village business as well, where we build retirement villages, a new project each year. So I'm in across quite a lot of different areas, but central to everything I do is human behavior, is the mentoring of people. That's really my life purpose. And as Sarah alluded to, what I'm really pretty good at is aligning money and the numbers with people, and that's what I've been successful at. And DNA Behavior itself has helped me a lot in actually just doing that and growing as a leader. So, a lot of today is about what do you need to succeed as an entrepreneur, and I'll just emphasize we're going to talk about the inner game rather than the capital raising and marketing and sales side of it, although they're very important components as well. And I'd ask all of you to think about what are you prepared to sacrifice for success? Because the journey of being an entrepreneur is not easy, and there is risk involved. And if you're not prepared to sacrifice something that you've got today in the pursuit of having potentially more tomorrow, then you're going to find it difficult. And a lot comes with this is the need to have a lot of passion. Now, what drove me to be an entrepreneur and was a big part of it, and has kept me in there, is my passion, but also is the desire for my personal freedom. So having my personal freedom is important above, believe it or not, having money. Money is a byproduct, and so if you're just going to be an entrepreneur to make money, that could be a problem, because you could be disappointed in that it might take you a while to make it. Of course, you do want to have the gratification at some point of a sellout and make a fair reward for your effort. But if your legacy is all about money only, it could be a disappointing, and you could make some bad decisions along the way. So there's got to be more foundation. And so for me, it was, it really was around, my personal passions of, wanting to see people develop, bring change into the business world through, the concepts of understanding people before numbers, mentoring people, and then also protecting my own personal freedom. Now, all of you are experiencing me through a webinar, and you don't have the joy of seeing me in person. So the point being here is, in some ways, for me as an introvert, a webinar is a very easy thing to do because I can sit behind a screen, whereas being in front of people is a completely different experience. And I bring up this point about introversion and extroversion early on in this presentation because I've had a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs entrepreneurial leaders recently. I'm in an organization. I'm a global leader of an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization, and a lot of the leaders in there have asked me, Hugh, I'm an introvert, and I don't know whether I really can be a leader in this organization. It's a struggle for me at times leading my business. Are the best entrepreneurs introverted? And that's actually what led me to do more research on what are the traits of successful entrepreneurs, because I told them that, well, I consider myself a pretty successful entrepreneur, and I'm probably one of the most introverted people that is out there. And that is true in my own DNA measurement, and we'll talk about the DNA behavior systems in a minute. And what we actually found is that in the research that more successful entrepreneurs are introverted than they are extroverted. And that is because they do take the time to think a little bit more. They spend time creative. They're plotting strategies. They can be a little bit task focused. And as the graphic says, they have very loud minds. So to be successful, you don't have to be necessarily this big in the room extrovert. And that point is true, in fact, or more true, the bigger the business becomes. So the leaders are some of the very biggest businesses out there. Look at Mark Zuckerberg. He is an introvert with Facebook, and there are many other Bill Gates. There are many examples there, in business, in politics, and in life who are introverts. So for some of you there who are introverts, wondering whether you really have the ability to step out there, I would encourage you to do that. And a lot of this is about, in going on the journey of entrepreneurship, is about living outside of yourself, and it's something that's important. But you can build strategies to continually grow. One of my DNA behavior staff asked me last night, well, Hugh, how do you find new investments in your investment business, and how do you find other opportunities? And I said, well, what I do is as an introvert, I attach myself and build relationships with what I call treasure hunters, with those people who like having breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week with people. They bring me the ideas. I know what to do with them. And it's a pretty good formula if everybody plays well together. So there's lots of ways to think about this. And to manage yourself depending on what your style is. But introversion and extroversion aren't the most important traits to be an entrepreneur. There's more to it. And looking at this graph here of the phrenology of an entrepreneur, the brain makeup of an entrepreneur, you will see that the ability to create your own reality, to manifest success, that's the number one, really the number one factor there. And we'll talk about how that is measured in a minute in terms of resilience. But that's really, the key thing is there is having, the inner desires, being able to see the future, having the passion and the drive to go and pursue it, to create it. And I personally, I have a coach. I have somebody that works with me on this journey, and I've worked with her for 12 years now, and she has definitely helped me, bring to life the dreams that I've had. And I would attribute any success I have, to her helping me stay on that path. And you can see some of the other traits here that are in creativity is one as well. And there's a lot of other research studies out there that would suggest that creativity is one of the most important to have. I think it is very important, but it's not the most. Having strong self-esteem is important, a strong work ethic, being focused, charisma, which a little bit comes from being actually extroverted. The more extroverted and what we call take charge you are, the more likely to have charisma. But having enough of that's important. Being able to sell. Interestingly enough, patience is very low. You can see that here. And so for the typical entrepreneur who's got all these other traits, they're not actually very relational. They tend to be a lot more results driven. The challenge is, though, from a leadership perspective of building a business, at the end of the day, you have got to build relationships. So overcoming the lack of patience is something that's important. And then this concept of whether entrepreneurs are born or made, we would say at DNA Behavior, the entrepreneur is born. You're born with these traits. and then your life challenge, your life purpose, the reason you're here is to develop them and turn that into something that's made, which is the end product. But you're going to be born with this drive, and there's a lot of research now beyond what we've done that points to the fact that 95% of you know who you are and how you make decisions and your drive comes from natural instinctive behavior, and that's why I called our company DNA Behavior to really get to that core. And so, taking this further, what I did earlier, not this year now, it was last year. In the middle of last year, we did a research study of 250 entrepreneurs that had built a business with $1 million turnover, and a number of them who had built a business of 10 million or more. And we looked at their behavioral traits and assimilated the information using our validated DNA behavior systems that a lot of people around the world have experienced. And now we've got 1 million people a year running through the system in 123 countries and 11 languages. So the system itself is powerful. And the outcomes of this was that the number one trait for an entrepreneur, and this gets stronger, these 5 insights that I'm going to provide you now get stronger the bigger the business gets. So in a way, the traits are a little bit more middle range for the smaller business, and for the business that gets bigger, moves from 1 million to past 10 million, which is a pretty big business. All of these traits I'm talking about now get stronger. And so the number one gene for an entrepreneur is resilience. These people in our system are very fast-paced. They're extremely rational. The key thing here is that they're able to bounce back from setbacks. They're able to handle rejection, and you're going to get a lot of rejection along the way of your ideas. Business plans, when you start a business, they start a business plan A, and they usually don't get traction before you're around a business plan F or G. And even then, it's got to transform itself. I'm out in Park City at the moment with my DNA behavior team, so I'm sort of a little bit seen as the great boss at the moment. I've brought my senior executives out for a strategy session because we've got to look at how we at DNA Behavior reinvent our business over the next few years. What is it going to look like at 2020 and 2025? And so that's all important there, in that you can reinvent yourself. You've got to look at success. You've got to look at where you failed. You've got to be able to bounce back from that. You kids can't go and cry in your soup. And success can take quite a long time. I've had it up. What I call an up and down journey as being an entrepreneur. The first 3 or 4 years were very successful, and I'd say I had a 10-year window where it was fairly quiet. There was really a lot of business building going on. Banged my head against the wall a few times, but in the last 2 or 3 years, it's really exploded out of the blocks. But you've always got to be there. You've got to be fairly tough and resilient to make this work, because it's not an easy journey. It's not a straight line. And the number 2 gene is being able to take risks. And it's a little like this mouse here. He's got his helmet on, and he's all ready to go. And does he make the choice to eating that piece of cheese and getting clipped there, or does he succeed? It's a 50 bet to some degree. And as an entrepreneur, I often say to people that I'm mentoring, this is like climbing Mount Everest, and getting base station is pretty easy. Now up there at base the wind, deciding to take that risk and go to the next level. And often, in building a bigger business, well, firstly, just to get into the business, start with, you've got to be prepared to take risks. But all the way along, you've got to make decisions that you've got to, particularly in today's disruptive world, there's very fast change out there, and you've got to be nimble, and you've got to make decisions that put your business on the line all the way through, and right up till you sell it. And even that involves risk as well, as to what potentially you lead to the table. So risk taking is big. You've got to be strong enough with that and have the ability to handle losses and setbacks. So the number 3 gene for entrepreneurs is creativity, and this is certainly true for the very much the earlier stage business. A lot of other research studies have brought out that this is potentially the one trait, that entrepreneurs are creative. Definitely, you've got to have the imagination and the resourcefulness to see an opportunity, to work out a different way to get there. And this is to some degree rubbing the two sticks together to a lot of great opportunity. The fourth one, which is important, and this one actually becomes the third one for the 10 million plus businesses. So once the business is going, creativity is a little less important. The work ethic and focus and the structuring of the business planning, the ability to set goals, the pioneering drive to stick at it, and the competitive drive, which is part of this, is it becomes very, very important. And then the last one is the what we call the external charisma, which is those people that are very take charge, outgoing. They tend to be big in the room, and this is important for a lot of entrepreneurs in the sense that of leading a movement, bringing the team forward. But as I said at the start, this isn't the most important one because of introverts that have learned in their own way to step up and do this. Yes, challenge. They aren't born necessarily with a great load of external charisma, but they learn to do it. But if you've got it, that's good. You've got to learn to harness it, but maybe you have a struggle in another area. Now, out of these 5 traits, I would emphasize that the resilience is really the most important one, and be hesitant to let someone become an entrepreneur without enough resilience. But I would not become the entrepreneur. Depending on your mix of these genes, it's about finding the right partner to go on the journey with you. So I'm not big about structuring yourself and setting yourself up at the start for success. And there's no harm if you've got the great idea and you've worked out how to do it, to go and get somebody else to partner up with you and make it to help make it successful. You don't have to go on that journey by yourself. So now let's just look at a couple of case studies. Jack Sun is one, and I've known this man for 15 years or so. He's built a lot of businesses all in one area in the food and beverage industry. He's got quite an empire of businesses. He's actually, as you can see, he's got traits here of being very resilient, and he's had his setbacks along the way, but nothing, and would today have an empire, in excess of $100 million turnover. That's not bad over an 20-year period. All in, as I said, all in the one area. When he's done something outside this area, it's never succeeded. So he's always done something. He's always been successful in the areas that he knows about. He can take risks, and his creativity, interestingly, is quite low. So he's always been good at developing something that already exists in a way, taking and analyzing it. And so creativity hasn't been his biggest driver. It's been these factors, and then a very strong work ethic, focused, competitive drive. And again, he's another one of these introverts that's managed to succeed. And then a very different person, Craig Moon, built a technology business that was in accounting software, a bit like in competitive. And Craig was one of my early clients, actually, that I worked with when I first entrepreneur, and I helped him build his family office out, because that's what I did at the time in my own family office business. And he's got a. This just shows you you don't have to have all the traits. In fact, he made it without being resilient. Wasn't a risk taker, extremely creative, pretty strong work ethic. What he did was he brought in the partners in the team to make that accounting software business great. But to be honest, if I saw these traits out the gate, I would be hesitant to let him start something by himself. But he was smart enough to bring a team in, put it around him, and let them operate the business and take forward and commercialize his ideas. So there are lots of ways to make it work. And so therefore, I don't want to necessarily be saying to anyone that there is a hard and fast rule that if you don't have all 5 traits, you won't succeed. Again, I'll emphasize it's better to have some of the key ones that I've talked about. But you definitely need to. Now you can have all of the traits or the idea and build a business, but you still got to lead it. You've got to run it. And the key thing for entrepreneurial leaders, the majority of entrepreneurial leaders, is to realize that you do have to adapt that natural hardwired style you have, which, as I said at the start, where the patience is low, to be relational, because you've got to build a team to succeed. You've got to have people around you. They're the ones who are going to help you make it all happen. A man can't operate as an island and build a large business. And so being able to build relationships with your employees and also with your customers is important. But in a way, that's a learned leadership behavior for entrepreneurs to succeed. But it's always got to be managed in balance with results. And so, what I do with a lot of entrepreneurs that have already got the business is, I do put them through processes to see how they're balancing out their relationship building and then maintaining the results, because these two factors are generally at odds with each other. If you're good at relationships, then you can be not as results driven, because you won't hold people accountable to the outcome. If you're too results driven and bottom line focus, it can be at the expense of people. The successful people balance this out. Something that's very important for the entrepreneur, once they've got the business started, if they haven't already started with a partner, is bringing in, and even if you have started with a partner, maybe nevertheless bringing in a COO or someone to help you run the business is important. What I call the business integrator. This is probably your most key hire at any time, and I work with a woman by the name of Debbie Gordon, who has a program called the Master Key Executive program that specializes in actually helping the business integrator that's brought into the business to learn to work with the entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur has a different mindset. But getting this relationship is right, and you can see from this graphic here and the person here with the dark green line where my cursor is going now, which is pretty much me, and down here, that's a lot of what I am. Pretty much the hard-charging bull, if you want to call it that, the serial entrepreneur. You need somebody that's a bit more middle range, who can work with you. And I'm lucky I have Leon Morales on my team, and his profile is pretty similar to this. And to balance it out, because the great thing with Leon is that while I set the strategy and are out there finding the new clients and developing some of the products, he's managing the team. He knows how everybody is feeling in the team, what they're doing. Are they getting their tasks completed? Are they being successful? And you need someone who can be that operational manager to make all that happen, but also can stand up and look me in the eye and say, Hugh, I don't think what you're doing is right. Can we have a talk about it? And so you need that right person there to be running with you to make the business successful and understands you. then you need to be able to take all of that and build the right team. And team building is not an easy thing to do, and this is where a lot of entrepreneurs fall apart. And what is important is to have different talents on the team, and that can be the problem. Is that you need different people on the team, but because they're different, that can sort of cause these grating and frictions and differences of opinion, and you don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. They're just being themselves. But you need, in a way, every different talent is a different asset that comes with it, a liability, and in a way, you've got to learn to manage that. And if you're going to be a great entrepreneurial leader, you've got to be able to deal with the differences. And what's important is inside your team is to have understanding, acceptance, and respect across everybody in the team. If there's one broken leg in any of that, inside the team, the team will feel it for a while, but things won't happen. And I know that, in running behavior, we have a great team at the moment, and at times we've had someone that's started off great, but they haven't been able to go along with the journey. They have to go. There's nice ways of doing it. You don't have to, have a hardline firing program there. It's more about finding a new home for them. I know in leading Big Review TV and being the chairman of the board, we've got to have very functional relationships, certainly that I've got to deal with, inside the board and then across the senior executive team for the business to grow to the $100 million level. The CEO has got to be able to handle all of that as well inside that business, which he is doing pretty well, and continuing to do. In fact, in that business, we're building leadership development programs so that the young upcoming leaders inside the business learn how to be leaders and to manage the teams. Because if you get that part right, which is big part of this inner game, the business will flourish, assuming that you have the right strategy and then that everybody is committed to the team, and which is really around an internal commitment to the goals. Once you have all of that together and there's good communication, then there's alignment and trust, and everything works from trust. So trust is the golden word at the end of the day, and it's harnessing all of those different talents. Now, an interesting issue for a lot of entrepreneurs is that is the business transitions and their own leadership through the business life cycle. And this can be pretty confronting for the entrepreneur. What I see a lot of is that there are entrepreneurs that are great at starting the business. They come up with the idea, and usually they're pretty good salespeople, and they can make the first couple of $1 million of revenue fairly easily because they can sell ice to Eskimos. They can, convince people that their idea is good, but then where they start to fall short is in the scaling up of the business. And so there are these transitions that take place, and they all have to be managed, and in a way they need different talents. And sometimes the entrepreneur that starts the business needs to find a way to step back and allow others in, because the great startup person, can handle sort of up to 30 employees or 20 employees, something like that. Is the hard-charging bull that gets it all going, is the visionary that gets it all going. He or she may not be right person to be managing the business at sort of 50 to 500 employees, where customer service now starts to become a bigger issue, the employee engagement issues, the customer engagement issues, starting to build some of the processes. And look at Mark Zuckerberg. He brought in Sheryl Sandberg as his running mate to handle this transition. And this is certainly where the master key executive transition becomes very important. You need a different person, and somewhat the internal culture of the business starts to change a little bit to be more client-centric, because you need the client, you need the repeat business there. But this can be a very difficult phase in getting that right executive leadership team in place, and then moving to 500 employees, where now as the founder you don't even know who 450 of them are. There's generally been 3 or 4 lots of turnover, and again, you need a different kind of CEO running the business, and not many entrepreneurs are capable of dealing with that. It's good to recognize for yourselves what you're ahead of the time, what your capabilities are going to be. And that this doesn't mean, I don't like to see the founders kicked out of the businesses. Often it happens with venture capitalists and whatnot. I think if you're ahead of the game and understand where you're going to be successful, then you keep your place. But you need to know ahead of time who to bring in and what's needed for the organization, because at 500 plus employees, it needs to have a lot of processes. And entrepreneurs don't like dealing with all the processes. Be good at developing and managing them. And so again, really the leadership transitions through here is just how you, as the founder, manage the bringing in of different people to allow your business to grow and flourish. And for today's presentation, I thought I would add in a little bit of spice, because this is a question that's often asked of me, around investing in the business and selling in the business. And I've done a lot of work in this emerging area called behavioral finance. And in a way, this was the field of human behavior in which I got DNA behavior started in the financial services industry, because we're a leader in this world of behavioral finance, which is really around the behavioral issues of making decisions, and the fact that people, every person is irrational, and we all have these mental sets of biases that are wired into us, into our brains from very early in life. Again, it's our DNA, and we make these very fast decisions, often without thinking, and without much rationality, and that is often triggered by emotions. And running a business, starting a business, running the business, growing it, selling it, there'll be plenty of emotions along the way. There'll be plenty of on-the-spot decisions. But if you can be a little bit more conscious of what you're doing along the way, it can help you. And the biggest mistake that entrepreneurs can make, and this has come from a lot of different research sources, but is actually, and experience shares, is actually holding on to the business for too long. And you can hold it on past the business's use by date in terms of the current strategy you've got, the financing that's there, and even the marketplace. And it can be also holding on to it past your ability to manage it. There's no shame in getting out, but one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs do make is they hang on. They hang on for too long, and a lot of the time it's because they don't know what else to go and do with themselves once they've sold the business. That is a huge issue, for the entrepreneur, because their meaning and purpose is gone. I also see a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners sell the business too early. It's made a few $1 million of revenue, and they flog it to some corporate player, take a check, and either go and start something else, or start driving boats and cars around and whatnot, and go for the easy life. But they've left a lot on the table, and there can be a regret with that. I saw a guy that I know pretty well flog a business for 30 million 2 years ago, but 2 years later it's worth $800 million. Could he have stayed in there longer and made more out of it? And that's, these are always the tricky decisions, and what's driving the decision making, is always important to understand. But a lot of the time it's emotions, it's your ability to handle risk. Of course, there are other circumstances as well that can cause you to want to sell. The third one is loss aversion. And again, we all do this. We hang on to a business, or we make an investment in the business, in an area of the business. I've done this, and we just hang on to it for too long, and we get stubborn, and we don't, we don't really want to close it down or sell it, and we're just afraid of taking the losses. And the other one is not investing enough in the business when it's ready for takeoff. So you put a chunk of change down on the table and you just allow it to then internally work and build the business up, but you never really invest any more and take the risks to let it go further. Bringing in venture capital, for example, is always a big decision. And if you're going to do it, you've got to know when to do it. I've bootstrapped DNA Behavior. I've not taken the outside capital, and but I've managed to finance it myself as it's grown. But it would have been easy to sit there and not finance it as it was growing, and I would stymie the success. But these are all behavioral issues that you will have to confront as a business owner at some point, and to be thinking about. So for all of you to learn a little bit more about yourselves and how you are wired for entrepreneurial success, you can go to our website at businessdna.com/entrepreneurship. You can click on the link there and complete the discovery process, and you'll get a report. I'll be working with Sarah as well going forward. We've got to do a little bit of contract work there, but on making this available in the Emery network as well. But if you just want to go and do it now, you can click in there and you will get a report that looks something like this, that will highlight how you stand up on the 5 key traits. So that's the start of your journey to discover your natural hardwired behavior that was ingrained from very early in your life on your entrepreneurial traits. It's really going to measure up how you're going to behave under pressure. And there's going to be plenty of pressure on that entrepreneurial journey. But you still, notwithstanding that you might have the raw materials, you've got to keep working on yourself, and you've got to keep bringing in the right people to be beside you to make that business grow in the longer term. And we have coaches on our team directly, working with on our team, but also as consultants that can work with you to climb the mountain, to get on top of Everest. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, you can go to dnabehavior.com. You can write us an email. Happy to talk with anybody about the entrepreneurial journey, what's involved, and think about getting yourself ready to jump in, or if you're already on the journey, what decisions do you make next strategically to grow your business. So Sarah, that's the presentation. If you want to throw me any questions, if they're there, happy to answer.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this information. And our first question is from someone who wants to start her entrepreneurial journey, but has been in another career for many decades and is just about to switch over. So what's your advice to our aspiring entrepreneurs on the line?
I think my advice firstly is that it will be, having been someone myself, even though I was pretty young when I started at 30, and of course there's a lot younger entrepreneurs that start now, kids starting at 15 and 16 and 18, and many don't go to college. But I think the exciting part is having your own freedom, and I believe there's a high price on that. I think if you've been in corporate life, and I had that challenge, but when I started, I wasn't married and I didn't really have a lot of financial obligations. You've got to make sure that you've got room and flex there, that once you go out of the corporate world, that you can manage yourself financially, and you're not going to get scared because you've only got 3 months savings in the bank, and if money doesn't come in at month 3 and you can't pay the mortgage, or you can't pay the school fees, or you've got to give up a holiday to Mexico or whatever it is, you shut it all down. So I think you've got to have yourself financially prepared. You've got to have, I would say it's very important to have a very clear purpose for going out, something that you're going to live by, and a passion, and see how, and have a vision of how that can be commercialized. I think the great thing, having had 21 years of real life business experience is, you have seen a lot of things going on out there, but you've got plenty of experience. You've probably got contacts as well. So they're all strengths, but maybe a lot of you have to also evaluate whether the contacts are really going to help you with your business. I think depending on how far afield how far away the business is from what you've been doing for the last 21 years is important. If you've been working, say, in the professional services area and you've got a business idea that relates to the professional services world and you can leverage directly the skills and knowledge you've got, that's probably a strength. Whereas if you're just seeing something that's completely left field from what you've been doing, that can be a harder journey, not impossible, but you have to sort of to think carefully. So this decision does come back to what I said at the start of what are you prepared to sacrifice to have that freedom? Have you got the real clarity about why you're doing it, what you're going to do, and have you looked at who's in your network of relationships? And one of the things I've found is for people stepping outside the corporate world, and one of my great friends did it, and he's actually working in my 5G Capital business at the moment, is to sort of bridge the journey, bridge the gap and learn what it's like to not have the protection of the corporate world, is to get a consulting gig and go a little bit naked, but not completely naked. Do something that you're familiar with, that you can add value to, make some money, and build and start the steps of building that business plan, and to get yourself ready for the next step. So get a little bit used to being outside the corporate world first. Is no harm in that. I don't believe there's any race here. I think it's about positioning yourself well, getting set up, getting your confidence right, and then going for it thereafter. Now, it's a different world. It's a different world if 4 other people have built a business plan and they want your expertise and they're prepared to pay you a big salary to come in and join them, and they're going to give you some stock. That's a different landing. Of course, you've got to make sure they've got the capital to sustain you. So, hopefully, I've provided some framework to think about that decision.
All right, thank you very much. And have you seen success stories from entrepreneurs who were working full time and built the business on the side until that business could actually sustain their living, or do you suggest people dive right in?
I am which is probably just following on from what I was just saying, and I don't know whether it's the same person asking the question or it's somebody else, but I think
It's a different person.
look, this is it's a great question. Keeping with the theme of what I've just said, I believe in starting small and slow and building yourself up. And so the first thing in life, I think, and the greatest joy in life really is to get in touch with what your purpose and your passion is, and what's really important, and where you see that you can make a difference. And that as far as for as long as you can, I would do that in the in your corporate world, and get that part right, and use your job or employment to speak to lots of people, and really think through it thoroughly. And even in doing that, what I know is that once you sort of decide that you want to be an entrepreneur and you're working in a job that is occupying your time for 12 and 14 hours a day, and you've got to go home and whatnot, it all starts to get frustrating. But I think that frustration gets removed if you can land the plane on, at least I'm passionate about this. This is what I want my life to be, and what I want to be doing. And then you can, take 1, 2, 3 years while you're in your corporate world to build it up. And, to share a real life experience with this, I've got a close friend at the moment that is somewhat on that path. He's been an entrepreneur before. He sold his business into a corporation. He's inside that corporate, and he's looking at, okay, well, when do I jump out and cut the payroll and the revenue flows? And I said to him, well, maybe there's a deal you can do with your employer, and take yourself off being an employee, make yourself a consultant with them, even potentially partner with that corporate, there's lots of different ways to transition across, and I would be very careful with that and take some of those steps first before you go completely naked. But there is a point where you can't build the business until you are released from the full-time job, because you've got to put your energy somewhere. You've got to be able to handle the phone calls, the sales calls, etc., etc. But in a way, it'd be good if you had your first contract ready to go and deliver in whatever it is before you've left the job, so there's some momentum there. So there is a point where you've got to jump out, but I would be slow with that rather than quick.
Okay. All right. And any advice with navigating family business dynamics and also multi-generational employees?
Multi-generation employees or family businesses? I suppose it's
So
all wrapped up together.
two separate questions there. Yeah. So family dynamics is one, and then if you have a multi-generational workforce.
Well, the family business is always hard, and I I have facilitated, in all of my work with DNA behavior, I've facilitated families, um, and through the decision making of the transition to the next generation, which is perhaps where this question is going, and which child in the family is going to run the business, how's that set up, and who is it, and that can be very challenging because there's lots of family history in there. There's lots of emotions. Parents might have a perception about one child versus another child in terms of capabilities as well. The equity as well between the siblings. If you're the sibling that's going to work in the business and to grow it, what reward do you get for that versus what your siblings are going to get? That the more it's arm's length and it's done on a professional basis, I think would be the healthier choices based on my experiences are, and also on what I've seen others say, like groups like Family Office Exchange and whatnot, that do also, like I do a lot of work in the area. I think is to sort of make the decisions on an arm's length basis as much as possible. So firstly is the person coming into the family business, are they right for the job? Are they based on, would they get the job versus an outside candidate? So it's got to be pretty close on that. Maybe not perfect, but I think you've got to sort of look at it that what's the remuneration going to be, and how does that get, what's then the alignment between the family shareholding versus what the family members get paid for doing work, and the talents. And of course this gets more difficult if there's one child that's super talented and another one that's not, or is talented in a different area, that's not capable of being the CEO. But I do believe in those situations having healthy family conversations is important. And I actually are working with a family that's in Mexico, and we got that engagement this morning to do exactly this. The father has made a lot of money out of a business. His son's coming in to take it over. His son's very pioneering, very aggressive. He is definitely an entrepreneur. His father's actually a little bit more cautious. What do they do with that? And how much reign does the son get, and what's the impact on the siblings who are not going to be in the business? And that gets down to conversations with everyone. And I do believe very open communication is important in dealing with that, and getting it out on the table. It's better to have the hard conversation while everybody's alive, while everything's functioning, than to sort of work on assumptions and manipulate it behind the scenes, because that only ends in tears and litigation and whatnot. So that's hopefully I'm answering that question. And Sarah, can you repeat this? The second one's about multi-generational employees.
Yes, correct. Correct.
So is this a situation where the employee have and worked with different generations in the family? Is that the thrust of the question?
So if this, so more so, this person clarified more so how to manage millennials. So thank you for clarifying that because it could have gone a few different ways. So yes, managing millennials.
Yeah, managing millennials is not an easy thing to do because millennials, in a way, have been brought up in prosperous times, and they've had everything at their fingertips, technology. Often they've been spoiled. There can be a lot of entitlement. In some ways, it's easy for them to go and get a job, or they can start a job and they can leave. And that even can play out in the family. You know, the millennials can show different levels of respect inside the family as well. There's other opportunities for them, so they're less likely to be loyal. But I bring a lot of it back to, at the end of the day, I bring most of these things back to helping the millennial really work out what their purpose is, what drives them, what's going to make them happy, what success looks like for them, and really do a lot of counseling and development at that level. Because once they get in touch with that, and if the family business is related to that, then they're more likely to want to stay in the business, and probably it's easier for them to be managed. Whereas if they're a little bit in there by sufferance, or they just think this is an easy lifestyle choice to make and can be in the business and there's no consequences, then that's a problem. So but the millennial is not going to be as easy in this day and age to manage because of some of those things. Whereas in the past, a family member will come into the business straight out of loyalty and stay there even if they're not completely happy with it, and follow the family footsteps and make it all work. Whereas the millennial can be a little more pushing up against some of that, and I think it just comes down to a business decision: should they even be in there? And that's where I would be looking at: are they a fit for the business, and is it right for their life to be in there? And if those things are true, then the management of them is going to be less of a problem. I think what becomes difficult is the relationship between the parents and the child on decision making and who's got control. That's what I was talking this morning from Mexico, where the son really would want to have control of some of the decision making, and is his father going to allow it? And I think that, being again, is another family conversation.
Okay. All right. And I know we are almost at time, but a couple more questions for you. So you
Yep.
talked about external charisma, and we have someone here who feels that they are missing it, but they would love to build upon it. So what are your tips there for building external charisma?
Well, um, I struggle with that myself every day, because I have there's two components to it. I personally have the take charge component, but I have the reserve nature. I can sit there more quietly and think things through, and let the the louder people in the room do the talking for a while. But then there's a point where you got to step up, and the way I've looked at that, and the framework I've built for myself, is you've got to find ways to live outside of yourself. And this is why I've taken personally taken leadership positions in groups like Entrepreneurs Organization, um, and in other groups, to consistently push myself a little bit more to be out there. I think that a lesson I've learned is that you've put yourself out there and go and do some speaking. Uh, um, find ways to make yourself heard, but you don't have to change who you are necessarily, and people will follow you. Remember this as well: you got to have the inner confidence that people will follow you because of the ideas you have, the thinking and the brains you have, and what you can contribute. You just need to be able to speak up enough for people to know that is there. And that can sometimes, speaking up can be verbally, but it can also be in written formats. That can be done through blogs. There's a great person out there called by the name of Susan Cain, and in fact I did this same presentation with her in December, in New York, and she wrote a book called Quiet Power. That would be a great book for you to go and read, for anybody to read, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, just to understand how introverts work. Because even if you're the extrovert, you need to know how to work with introverts and know that there's often a lot more going on and a lot more power there. And so I think studying that is also good. And it's just building strategies, and I found that for me, it's putting myself into some community situations where I can be involved and known. Um, it's doing some presenting. So I realized that for the businesses that I have, I am really the flagship. And even though I've been at times the reluctant leader, I have to be get that reluctance out of the way and go out, stand out the front, and get on with it. And but don't punish yourself for it. You got to love the fact that you're introverted, because the statistics show many great introverts build some of the greatest businesses out there. So I would also attach yourself to what I call treasure hunters. Know who the extroverts are out there and let them do the networking for you. Let them spread your message. So it's just a matter of the positioning of yourself. So I hope that helps. And I'll go and get that book, Quiet Power, from Susan Cain, and I think that will really help you work through it, own the introversion, and build yourself out to be great like she has.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. And I sent out a link to Quiet. I also recommend that book. Really enjoyed it. That a link is sent out to that
Yep.
book on Amazon in the chat area, as well as the link to the presentation that Hugh did for alumni in Atlanta back in November. And I will also send that out in the follow-up email along with Hugh's presentation and information on DNA Behavior International. So, Hugh, thank you so much for your time today. And for those of you who do reside in Atlanta, please join us on January 25th at Atlanta Tech Village to celebrate the 2017 Emory Entrepreneur Awardees. We have 25 awardees from a variety of industries and entrepreneurial stages. And we will be celebrating them, but also connecting our professionals in Atlanta who either work with entrepreneurs or who are entrepreneurs themselves. So please come out and email me if you have questions about that event. And Hugh, anything else you'd like to add before we leave the webinar?
No, I think nothing that I probably haven't said. I would just say, Sarah, to everyone, go and learn more about yourself, what your strengths, what your struggles are, own them, love yourself, pursue your passion, live a life of freedom. And, remember, it's not just about what others are doing, it's about what you do yourself. And, this is as much as business is an outer game, it's an inner game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for encouraging us to take a look at ourselves in 2018 and try and be better and figure out what our passions are and figure out who our best partners are, which is why you should also come out to our alumni events to potentially search for that treasure hunter or introvert or extrovert who needs to complement your skill set. So thank you everyone for your time today and best of luck with your business pursuits. And we hope to see you all again soon.